Today we're looking at the halo effect in Lightroom and how to create depth and separation and make a subject stand out from the background in just a few easy steps. You'll need the latest version of Lightroom to do this, so let's jump straight in. Here's an image of yours truly taking a stroll underneath the South Bank boardwalk, and this technique is perfect for images like this where separation between subject and background can be improved. So let's start off by opening up the mask filters. Now there are two ways to do this, so I'll show you both ways with 4 different images. The first way is by choosing Select Subject. And Lightroom has done a pretty good job with the selection considering it's quite dark back there. But we'll just need to tidy up a few of the edges which will make things even more effective. Choose the Subtract tab and the Brush tool because we're going to be brushing away some of the tatty edges from the blue mask. And you can use the parentheses keys on your keyboard to change the size of the brush. I'll just speed through this process, but this doesn't need to be pixel perfect, just enough for a clean selection. Now the original selection missed some of my backpack, but I'll sort this in just a moment. Let's get the important piece of the composition, the camera, and a few more bits. And the legs look fine to me. Now, here comes the fun part. Now we're going to invert the mask so everything else is now selected apart from the subject. And then the key part of the process, intersect mask with radial filter. Then simply draw a radial circle behind the subject to create a halo effect. Now you would think the effect would be produced by using the exposure slider, but this actually has quite a distracting, oversaturated result. A much better way instead is to use the dehaze slider, which creates more realistic depth and haze in the background, and coupled with reducing contrast, some really nice separation between subject and background. Now, I mentioned earlier that the original mask hadn't quite selected the rucksack correctly, so we can sort that by choosing Subtract on the mask, and choose the Brush tool and simply paint back in the missing areas. Here's a quick before and after to show you how well this effect works. Now, a few more final edits in this image, one more Select Subject mask and boost those whites for more contrast. A little bump on the overall shadows slider, and let's get rid of those yucky greens and yellows from the algae on the walls. And finally increase the blacks for more punch. Another way we can use this technique is the complete reverse. I took this image years ago, and the separation between the guy's arm and the background is a little weak for my taste. So let's use this halo effect in a different way. First, I'm going to boost the blacks for more punch in those shadows. Then let's once again pop up to the mask filters, but this time use the radial gradient. Then draw a circle and just put the center point in the middle of his arm. Also, I don't want this to affect the rays coming in from the top left corner. I want to keep those as they are. Now let's intersect with the subject. Then simply invert the mask so the selection is covering the background in the lower portion of the image. Now reduce down the exposure by 3 stops. And boom, we have ridiculous separation on that beautiful Samoan tattoo. Now here's an image of the same guy in bright sunlight. It's a pretty decent shot, but the separation between him and the background could be more defined, and I'm going to use 2 variations of this technique to improve the image. I'm going to start by using the radial gradient to draw around the subject, but being careful not to affect the sunlight coming in from the left side. That looks pretty good. Then let's intersect with the subject, and once again invert the selection. Then we can bring the exposure down by around 2.5 stops. And that's a good start. Now I'll create another mask using the Select Subject and bring those blacks down on him to balance out the exposure. -40 should do it. And now for a third mask, but this time using the Brush tool, and I'm going to bring down the feather edge to around 10%. Now all I'm going to do is trace along the edge of the body using the little cross in the middle of the brush to create a shadow. Then if we intersect with the subject and invert it, we can now bring the exposure down to create a stronger sunlight shadow and better separation. Using 2 methods of the same technique, this image has now come to life. Now let's see how this method works on a non-human subject. A nice exposure here with the leading lines of the car park and the bike reflections in the puddle, but not great definition between bike and background overall. I'll start with some basic adjustments. Changing the picture profile to Adobe Vivid, increase the shadows by around 50%, blacks down to around -20, and vibrance increased to about 50. Next, on the HSL sliders, I'm going to take out those nasty blues in the back, leaving just the warm tones. Increase the oranges. Luminance, we can brighten those blues a touch. And finally, on the hues tab, really warm up those oranges and yellows. Looking pretty good. Now for some magic with the masks. We'll go with the radial and pop a nice oval shape to stretch most of the width of the image behind the bike. Then the usual steps of intersecting with the subject and inverting. You know the drill. Then let's add some negative dehaze to create that depth in the image. And contrast down 100%, a bit more bump in the exposure. And for a change, and to make that haze even more mist-like, let's bring the Kelvin all the way down and tint all the way up. Now the lower portion of the bike seems a little underwhelming, but I don't want to touch the top half of the bike. So using a radial mask again, and covering the lower section only, let's intersect so only the subject is selected. Let's boost the clarity and whites to really make the bike stand out. An increase in the shadows. And I think one more adjustment on the reflection in the water. With the brush tool, paint around the reflection. And include some of the roof too. And our friend the clarity slider should do the trick. And some whites. These new additions to Lightroom really are a game changer. Now, this of course was all possible before using Photoshop and layer masks, but Lightroom has just made it infinitely more user-friendly with their subject selection algorithm. Really impressive stuff from Adobe. Anyway, that's your lot, folks. Thanks for watching. Hope this little episode on subject separation and depth was helpful, and hopefully it should bring some of your images to life. I'll see you next time.